Before I begin this video, I'd like to dedicate it to Ronald Rocket. Ronald is a hardcore Star Wars fan, perhaps pushing on a sheeple, as Bill Burr put it, and as admittedly my most negative Star Wars video to date, right up there with The Force Unleashed 2's boss ranking. I hope you, Ronald, don't crumble to ash watching me continually say, I don't like Star Wars. I don't like Star Wars. I actually love Star Wars to, well, disagree, Ronald, and I'm simply here to make evens. I know you want to kill me, even eat me, perhaps cooked to a delicious medium rare, but I'm here to say thank you. I've laughed a lot, and Mexican Goku is, well, a perfect summary. So, I warn you, Ronald, there is a lot of I don't like this thing and this Star Wars thing throughout the video. If you self-immolate halfway through or something, I apologize. You were warned. Anyways, after hundreds of comments on our two Force Unleashed rankings as well as convenient timing, the Force Unleashed Ulterior Wii, PlayStation 2, and PSP version has re-released on Nintendo Switch with quote-unquote improved graphics and quality of life changes, although as I quote Amber Heard's legal team, hearsay, this game has some problems. I heard non-stop how much different, grander, and generally better the Wii variant of the Force Unleashed was, so inputting my above average prospects as set up by the many comments received requesting this video, and I will say I am utterly grateful for all the support our first two Force Unleashed videos got, this game did not live up to expectation. I'm a sucker for graphics and visual design, and almost every physical design of characters, movement, and planets were not just lower grade due to the graphical limitations of the PS2 and Wii, but looked significantly worse intrinsically. Best put, a graphical demaster of the PS3 and Xbox 360 version. As well, the gameplay is choppier, the camera unstable, and most importantly, the combat felt almost like a traditional RPG, with many attacks having no tells and being completely undodgeable as compared to, once again, the superior version in my opinion. Not to mention, the biggest selling point was the abundance of content this game apparently had. However, my first run on this, me being an established veteran of these games, took me around 6 hours to beat, or for reference about as long as the Force Unleashed 2. And for the Wii version, there's a notable lack of DLC as featured in the Ultimate Sith Edition. All of that leads me to say I love this game. Chrome Studios and now Asper Media for the remaster did a great job with the hardware given, although when compared to the Lucasfilm Games version, the overall lack of polish makes it less engaging. Admittedly, I was super amped to do the motion controls, but yeah, that's on Nintendo, and I will do this with proper Joy-Cons one day. Nonetheless, this game was extremely fun and the bosses within were somewhat fantastic. I will not be counting any enemy groups, take Wookiees, Imperial troops, and so on, and bosses with multiple encounters like the Rancors and Junk Behemoths are combined as a single unit. As just another example of an incredibly appealing Star Wars Legends video game, The Force Unleashed Wii features some of the most enthralling gameplay of any I've ever experienced and the bosses that make it live up to its billing. Let's get into it. So as to not repeat myself later, although I will nonetheless, the matter of fact is that most bosses in this game that feature in both versions are worse than their multiverse variants. Sometimes the difference is slight, and in one specific case the improvement is significant. However, with almighty douchebag Ozzy Stern, his fall from grace is exponential. In synopsis, both are the same, a large arena with shield generators you need to destroy while also handling his all-terrain Kashyyyk transport, but in this case the shield generators make him invincible rather than the building within and are only open to destruction while active. There are 4 evenly spread out in a diamond, but mix them swapping on and off at random with the AT-KT's catastrophically broken seismic charge, and all that together pushes this task onto a tier of horseshit alongside the likes of the Bed of Chaos's balls. As is the case with any oversized enemy in this game, attacking them head-on with a lightsaber is in a practical reliability sense impossible, meaning your only route to success is aerial storm, force push, and force lightning. This will be a recurring theme just as in the first video, but unlike the first video, that's less the fault of the player and more the game. When an enemy has hitboxes preventing you from utilizing the base mechanic of its combat, there's already something inherently wrong with the design. Ozzy Stern isn't horrible necessarily, just the witch's brew of a gigantic health bar, high damage, and a lack of offensive capability, only aided by occasional QTEs, makes it by far the most frustrating boss in the game. The Junk Golem, also known as the Scrap Scavenger, with the two having no discernations in appearance nor mechanics, is the first of 3 featuring Kazdan Paratus productions on this list. These guys are extremely similar to the Terror Biodroids from TFU2 with half the visual appeal. It's like fighting a dog from Souls but with Force Lightning instead of a rapier or twin blades. Now this is a boss I wish was in the PS3 version. If you didn't watch my ranking of those bosses, please do if you'd like. Then for reference, I quite enjoyed the Junk Titans. Anyways, this boss has one move of note, a Mario 64 looking attack where it shoots out its arms like a Wipeout gimmick. Once again, Force Lightning and Force Push is basically your only route to victory, although with level 2 Lightning, Junk Behemoths should go down with little trouble, frustration aside. I know, I said I wouldn't count enemy groups, but I'd argue the Mandalorians are exceptions, seeing as 1, they appear in this level alone, and 2, are different mechanically than any other enemy in the game. That being said, there's basically no noticeable difference without nitpicking between them and Imperial Jump Troopers, and I was expecting more after playing Bounty Hunter very recently, leaving me even more disappointed. With a mixture of flamethrowers and deflectable blasters, the Mandalorian gang stalk is alright, just sort of easy and even passive if you know how to handle flying enemies. Large Junk Creation, same story. The Junk Titan has a lot more moveset variety with its axe and use of AoE stomps, although I much prefer the other version's quick time and gameplay, and the impact of it as a precursor to Kazdan rather than the last defense makes it less meaningful. Chopa no Temo's private Decepticon actually has some great Legends connections. The Basilisk War Droid, a semi-sentient being, was designed by the native Basiliskian race on the planet of Basilisk. Mandalorian Crusaders successfully invaded the planet in 4017 BBY, leading to their pillaging of the War Droid, and they make appearances in some of the best Legends comic material, those being Tales of the Jedi, the Sith War, and Knights of the Old Republic. I played the fight wrong, however the difference it would have made is minute. You're intended to force push the droid and use telekinesis on the many boxes and explosives around the room, although I went for, take a guess, the Force Lightning route, and from the looks of it, both paths are made up of carefully timed offense and running for your life for the rest of the encounter. The Basilisk is fine, but flaunts a somewhat ridiculous amount of health for what should be a mini-boss playing undercard to the main event. So far, we've made 6 Star Wars boss rankings, this included, and the ATST holds firm as one of the most commonly featured bosses with 4 separate appearances, not counting other Imperial variants. Like all others, it's what you'd expect within the confines of this game's mechanics, and keeping your distance is about as much advice as I can give. This runs the risk of getting ragdolled due to the transport's obnoxious rockets, but lightning and force push is well more dependable than the lightsaber in every way. The camera strikes again. There really isn't much difference between this and any given oversized vehicle or creature in this game, besides that the majority of his attacks are dodgeable by running away. With there being more throwable objects than the hardware can handle, there should be a subtle tell that you should, well, throw the objects, and the Bull Rancor's lack of Maris Brood along with forced hit and run tactics makes it far worse than the PS3 version. It's the same, but it's more. I usually prefer controlled chaos like your average Dark Souls boss, but in some cases, like let's say a Felucian Rancor trio, I find myself overloading my mind with so much information I just give up thought and have fun. Is this only above 8 bosses because it's a lightsaber duel? Yeah, that'd be correct. It's sad how little mechanical variety you get to utilize as Darth Vader. Understandably, it's the introduction to the game, so they wanted to limit controls to just the basics, but that's what made the PS3 version's Battle of Kashyyyk so f***ing awesome. You really are just Vader. Without much tutorial nor explanation, you're dumped into the game as a Dark Lord of the Sith, and every button has an extremely destructive output. In contrast, there's not much to this fight, seeing as you're about as force powerful as Etain Termakin from Republic Commando Hard Contact. Disappointing is an understatement, although the later repeat Kento Merrick holds a bit more leverage. This is another boss I would have adored in higher definition. Cleef, full name Cleef, was a Gungan bounty hunter who at one point was Senator Jar Jar Binks' security chief, but left seeking adventure and eventually crossed paths with Chopa no Timo. He quickly became no Timo's most trusted bounty hunter, even earning position as second in command and the combat trainer of his henchmen. This fight isn't just a primal bounty hunter and star killer, there's two heavy tactical fighting units that serve as dangers in both close quarters and far-ranged combat. The suplex finishers were a bit disappointing, I must say, but Cleef's brutal death makes up for it by all means. Cleef's freaky design and simple but somewhat difficult fight lands him just below the halfway point. When an alien in Star Wars looks so uncharacteristically different from others of the same race, they're probably important and will show up at some point again. Drexel Roosh is the gold standard of quality alien design, and while semi-related, he really points out how lacking Disney's non-human designs are in live action, be it CG or practical. As expected, the difficulty is at an all-time minimum, seeing as it's a non-Force user versus a Force entity. Nonetheless, the ending cutscene is exactly the type of shit you'd come to expect of Starkiller. Completing our trifecta of mercenary warriors, Mandalorian Kingpin Chopa no Timo is almost good enough to redeem the Basilisk before him. Hand-to-hand combat is not the route to go, and force push on objects and Chopa himself are without question the most viable option. Also, he sounds like Rocky after he beat Apollo in Rocky 2. Yo, Adrian! Hell yeah, but they still are way less cool than before. Fun fact, Shadow Guards scale above the Inquisitors in canon, and reasonably so. They are difficult, featuring a wide array of force abilities as well as legions of Shadow Troopers that make it a game of chess only few bosses can rival. For generally insignificant fights, the two Shadow Guards featured are both some of the best looking and intense bosses in the game. Again and again and again, the Wii version of a boss is significantly worse than their PS3 counterpart. This is one of the worst moggings of all. Kasdan on Xbox 360 was by far the most emotional boss in my opinion, and the scenery of the High Council chamber on Raxus Prime blending with the emotions of a decrepit, lost Jedi Master whose only wish was to prove himself to the Council made for one of the best moments in either Force Unleashed game. Not to mention, the boss was all over the place with mechanical variety and one of the better quick times to boot. This one doesn't even have a quick time, is far more prone to the Force than the other, already cheesable Kasdan, and is fought in the murky trash swamps of basically Concord Dawn over, once again, the onlooking sunset of Raxus Prime. I am fully aware I'm going to get pummeled with comments claiming blasphemy, but point stands, the difference in emotions and gameplay between these two is night and day, and if it wasn't obvious, this was one of the most underwhelming bosses of the entire lot. I'd say with this, the silver lining between the Xbox 360 and Wii bosses starts to get much more muddled. While I still prefer the other Ram Kota, namely in voice acting and camera, the fights were equally hard and I struggled in both cases. Serving as a warm-up to using the Force as a common component of your arsenal, once you start to figure out the rhythm of this fight, it gets significantly easier. I severely dislike Ram's AoE, but the respawn mechanic in this game is a saving grace. Lord knows how the he survived a drop from space compared to the other, still pretty ridiculous one. However, this boss marks the true beginning of Starkiller's rise in power, as well as a turning point in the quality of bosses on this list. This is essentially the Kento Merrick from the other Force Unleashed introduction, but getting this instead of the Sith Warrior is an unfair substitution. The emotions aren't downplayed, and this being Galen's true point of no return, only saved by Juno from a total eclipse of darkness, made this boss stand out. Vader's manipulation is also crucial in this boss, and I like it when Vader is made out to be villainous over the increasing amount of media portraying him as just a victim of Palpatine's exploitations. While literally minutes shorter than the damaged Vader from TFU on Xbox 360, I much prefer not getting impossibly countered and tossed around like a play toy. It's stupidly easy and is as close as this game gets to beating on a lifeless puppet, but there's something special about that in turn. The Thelan Sith Lord Darth Phobos was one of the most surprising bosses in the game. First off, Thelan was a great species choice for a Sith. Another favorite example would be Bith like Darths Tenebris and Venomous, or Shagrian like Darth Warlock III. Thelans feature semi-commonly, like the dancer from Jabba's palace in episode 6 or Latsrazi from the Clone Wars for reference, but in this case Phobos is a manipulative Sith Lord whose simulacron makes up the Jedi Trial of Insight. She wields a dual-blade lightsaber, and the fight itself does an excellent job of visualizing Phobos messing with Starkiller's head. She has the ability to flip around controls and completely blur vision, and can teleport at will. Come to think of it, maybe she was a Night Sister. Nonetheless, the neat lore and fun fight within the Jedi archives makes this one of the game's surefire highlights. I feel like we all have that one character who has few appearances, little to them, yet we just hold them up there as favorites for no real reason. While Alex's is Gabi from Attack on Titan, I'm just kidding, am I? Darth Desolus is mine without question. He's got a really badass name and also has red Sith lightning. For the uninitiated, that is arguably the most powerful quote-unquote common Sith feat in Legends, according to the Darth Plagueis novel, which I've mentioned quite a few times so far, with other examples of red lightning wielders being Darth Tenebris, Darth Maul, and the Sun. Desolus has a shield and what I believe to be a lightsaber Shoto, and this makes his tells extremely hard to discern. Force Lightning does work to Desolus ironically enough, and this fight should be done and dusted fairly quickly, but is still one of the most exciting bits in the game for me personally. Excuse me here, but this is really the best moment for me to give my overall thoughts on the bosses of both Force Unleashed games summarized. If you can't hear out of either ear, then I'd understand if you don't understand that the Wii version has significantly worse fights in terms of every ingredient that makes a boss. Be it voice acting, soundtrack, displayed emotions, visual design, and graphics, you name it, the other TFU is just better. While Shaak Ti is number 4, the same place she was in the first video, she is not even relatively close to her other variant, and I just wanted to point out one last time before the bosses of this game actually break even with the other that they kinda suck by comparison. Nonetheless, this is a game of how often you can force lightning before being reset by a quick time. The Ancient Abyss plays no role at all in this fight outside of background and QTE, and in turn the lack of phases makes it even less varied by nature. I am a fan of this boss to an extent, just like most it's repetitious. I really enjoyed Maris Brood in both games, and with the knowledge I've acquired since the first video, she in fact didn't bleed her crystals in between the time of Shaak Ti's boss and then, as Kyber crystal bleeding wasn't a Legends process, rather Sith and Darkside users unnaturally created synthetic crystals with geological processors. The highlight of this version is its quick time. The fight is similar to the other in that you can max out Ground Slam, which in the other game is Lightning Shield, and she provides little fight in return. At about halfway, a Rancor intrudes, providing a minor, even unnecessary break from the combat, but the roller coaster second half makes up for it, and once again the QTE is awesome. What should be a shock to absolutely nobody, Darth Vader just barely loses out as the best boss in the game again. I won't even mention the other game, this is just one long, strenuous fight with Vader in the preceding room to the Emperor's throne, and the massive arena was definitely a striking difference. However, it's still a duel with Vader, and while the novelization claims he was toying with Starkiller and in turn purposefully let himself get damaged, I like the headcanon this game creates by simply making it so that Starkiller is more powerful than Darth Vader. The deeper cut you go, the more damaged he becomes, even fighting for a short while without the helmet. As the most Force-able enemy in the game, the Force is practically useless and reliance on dodges and counters is the only way to come out on top. While I much prefer the vast levels of variance in the other Vader boss, this was quite the duel. I did mention earlier there was a Lone Star boss who was levels above their counterpart from the PS3 version. While still featuring the same incredibly epic soundtrack, the Emperor's low-def finale is by far the best boss in the Wii Force Unleashed, and by way of excluding his Royal Guard, unblockable attacks, and Force Lightning dependent mechanics, this lightsaber duel ends up being multiple times better than the other, pretty lame closing act. I don't know if there is any media where Palpatine used his lightsabers post-Yoda duel, or at least while disheveled as Galactic Emperor. If there is, let me know. He's extremely fast, and like Vader, has a wide array of unique Force abilities that create exceptionally fun combos. It's beyond cool getting to square off with Sidious in lightsaber combat, and his grand moveset intertwined with the duel creates one of the most scenic moments in Star Wars games. As well, the closing QTE shows off his true nature as a mortal god, the embodiment of the dark side of the Force, and the final Sith, the ending of the Sith Grand Plan. This is far and away the best boss, and Sidious's redemption from disappointing pastime to world-class duel is commendable in every sense of the word. Thank you so much for watching, and we hope you enjoyed. I apologize for being so harsh, but my expectations were admittedly set up. If you do happen to like this version more than the other, that's fantastic, and I absolutely respect your opinion. I just prefer modernization and more reactionary established combat. Remember to like and subscribe if you haven't, and be on the lookout for future uploads every Wednesday. That's all for now. Deuces.